Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Lair Siddiqui, the father of Holophase. Episode 13, The Silent Ground. Part 25. Not mathematics itself. Phi enables. Math describes. In part 24, we earned something clean. One coherent world, one comparability structure. Not because we like simplicity, because a world that stays readable cannot carry two incompatible ways of being comparable at once without tearing its own meaning apart. And the moment that lands in the mind, a seduction arrives. It arrives in the voice of intelligence, in the voice of elegance, in the voice of perfect certainty. It says, so the universe is mathematics. So phi is mathematics. So the most real thing is the equation. This part exists to stop that smuggling, to keep the foundation clean, to keep the firewall alive. So I will say the contract early, say it calmly, say it like a boundary stone. If you hear me smuggling space, time, energy, matter, or dynamics as primitives here, treat it as an error. Good, now we can move. Because what we are about to do is not to weaken mathematics. We are about to place mathematics correctly, with respect, with love, with discipline, with humility, and with teeth. Here is the core claim, plain, then even plainer. Mathematics successfully describes reality because reality has stable, comparable patterns. Mathematics is the disciplined study of patterns, but mathematics is not the source of pattern. Phi is what makes patterns possible at all. Now simpler. Math describes. Phi enables. Mathematics is a map. Phi is the condition that makes there be a territory that can be mapped. And the map is not the territory. That sentence sounds like a slogan until you feel what it prevents. Because humans fall into two opposite errors here, and both errors break the world. The first error is mathematical worship. We start treating equations like gods. We start believing that what is written cleanly is more real than what is lived. We start hiding inside symbols, because symbols do not bleed. We start thinking that if something is formal, it is true. The second error is mathematical rejection. We start thinking math is a cold game, just marks on paper, just arbitrary rules. We start treating it as disconnected from reality. We throw away one of our sharpest tools because we confuse a tool with an idol. Holophase refuses both. Holophase says mathematics is one of the greatest compression miracles the human mind has ever built. But it is still downstream. Downstream of comparability. Downstream of readability. Downstream of phi. And if you place it upstream, you commit a category mistake so deep it can intoxicate a civilization. Let me make it tangible. Let me make it felt. Imagine you are holding a map, a real map, not an idea. Paper in your hands, lines, symbols, a legend, a scale, a small blue line that stands for a river, a small brown curve that stands for a mountain road. Now imagine you walk into the river and try to drink the map. It will not quench you. You can stare at the blue ink until your eyes ache. No water will enter your mouth. Because the map describes water. It is not water. Now imagine you try to camp on the map. You lay the paper on the ground, you curl up on it, you will still be cold. Because the map describes shelter. It is not shelter. Now imagine you try to cross the map, as if crossing ink were the same as crossing distance. You step over the blue line with one foot. You say, I crossed the river. But in reality, you did not cross anything. You crossed a symbol, a description, not the described. This is obvious with maps, and yet we forget it the moment the map becomes mathematical. Because mathematics feels like the map of all maps, the pure map, the eternal map, the map that seems to live even if nobody looks at it. And so the seduction returns. Maybe the map is the territory. No, a map can be unbelievably faithful. So faithful that it lets you arrive in the right place. So faithful that strangers can coordinate across continents and centuries. But faithfulness is not identity. Description is not generation. Compression is not creation. This is not an insult to mathematics. It is the placement that makes mathematics honest. Now I want you to hear the deepest reason this matters. If you confuse mathematics with the ground of reality, you start believing that writing replaces testing. You start believing elegance replaces scope. You start believing confidence replaces comparability. And this breaks the firewall. Because in Holophase, truth is not what can be written. Truth is what survives comparison. Over and over. Across observers, across methods, across time. That was part 21. And mathematics, no matter how beautiful, does not get immunity from that rule. Mathematics is a candidate description. It must earn its authority by surviving tests. And the reason it can survive tests at all is because phi makes testability possible. Now let me bring in the simplest felt example. A symphony. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine an orchestra. A violin draws a line through your chest. A drum hits and your breathing changes. A choir rises and suddenly you remember someone you loved years ago. You did not calculate your way into that memory. The pattern arrived. It moved through you. It happened. Now open your eyes and picture the musical score. Black marks on white paper. Lines, dots, tempo markings, instructions for breath. You can analyze that score with astonishing precision. You can count beats, measure intervals, prove theorems about harmony. You can even use it to recreate the symphony in a different city, a different century, with different hands. That is power. That is real. That is not mere paper. And yet, if you press the score to your ear, it is silent. If you burn the score, the music can still live in memory. If you forget the music, the score becomes dead code until someone breathes it back into sound. So what is the score? The score is a compressed description of a pattern. What is the symphony? The symphony is the realized pattern as lived sound. And what is phi in this? Phi is what makes the pattern in the first place. Because for a melody to exist, there must be distinguishable notes. For rhythm to exist, there must be distinguishable beats. For harmony to exist, there must be distinguishable relations. Distinguishability is not an extra decoration, it is the precondition. That precondition is phi. So mathematics is like the score. It is a disciplined way to store and transmit pattern. But it does not generate the music by existing. It points. It instructs. It compresses. It carries. It does not become the thing. Now come closer to survival. Bread, not as a concept, as warmth, as weight, as smell, as something that can change a day. Now look at a recipe. Numbers, ratios, times, temperatures, need for this long, rest for that long, bake at this level. The recipe can be made mathematical. It can be optimized, scaled, made reliable. A bakery can feed a city because recipes can be stabilized, measured, repeated. That is a triumph. But a recipe does not feed you. Bread feeds you. The recipe is a compressed description of a reliable transformation. The bread is the realized outcome. And the recipe only works because the transformation has stable, comparable structure. You can tell wet from dry, risen from flat, burnt from golden. Those are comparisons. Those are distinctions. That is phi at work. So the rule repeats. Math describes patterns. Phi makes patterns possible. Now let me take you back to the factory, because there we learned this distinction with our hands. On the wall hung pattern diagrams, grids, colored squares, symmetries, borders measured in ratios, repeats counted in knots. The diagram was a kind of mathematics, a compression of a design into a portable instruction. It was so powerful that different weavers could produce the same carpet without speaking the same language. That is what public pattern looks like. But the diagram was not the carpet. The diagram did not carry the weight of wool. It did not carry the small mistakes that become part of a real object's life. It did not carry the way color shifts under morning light. It did not carry the fatigue in the fingers. It did not carry time. It did not carry endurance. It described. It did not become. And then there was the harshest lesson. Sometimes the lights failed. Sometimes the room became darkness. And something strange happened. The diagram still existed. The sequence still existed in memory. The mathematics was still true in the sense that the description was internally consistent. But the carpet stopped being a readable thing, because we could not distinguish red from blue, knot from gap, row from row. The description survived. The readability collapsed. And when readability collapses, what collapses with it is not merely comfort. Work becomes impossible. Correction becomes impossible. Truth becomes impossible. Because truth requires comparison, and comparison requires phi. This is why part 25 belongs in the silent ground, because we are placing mathematics inside the deeper condition that makes mathematics meaningful. Without phi, mathematics becomes a closed game, perfect, beautiful, and floating, with no grip. Now notice what this does to modern temptation. People say, the universe is made of equations. Listen carefully. Even to say made of is to smuggle a picture. So we firewall it. Holophase does not begin from stuff. Holophase begins from readability. Phi is the primitive. Everything else is readout, licensing, constrained, certified structure. So when someone says the universe is mathematics, Holophase asks a simpler question. What makes any symbol mean anything? What makes any equation about anything? What makes equals meaningful? What makes difference meaningful? What makes pattern detectable? The answer is not another equation, because any equation already presupposes meaning, already presupposes comparability, already presupposes the ability to say, this symbol is not that symbol. This relation matches that relation. This statement contradicts that statement. All of that is phi. So mathematics is not the source. Mathematics is a disciplined extension of phi into public memory, a way to compress many comparisons into a small object that can travel. That is why mathematics scales civilization. That is why bridges stand. That is why navigation works. That is why technology is coordinate. Because mathematics is a carrier of compressed comparability. But again, compression is not creation. Description is not the described. Now I want to sharpen something that saves people from being hypnotized. Mathematics is internally powerful, but internal perfection is not external truth. You can build a flawless mathematical world that describes an imaginary land perfectly, and it remains flawless. But it does not become true about this world until it survives comparison with what is publicly readable. This is a deep ethical point too, because people can hide behind symbols. They can intimidate with Greek letters. They can present a model as if it is reality itself. And if you are not trained, you can mistake complexity for truth. But Holophase gives you a simple defense. Ask 3 questions. What comparisons does this mathematics compress? What is the declared scope? What would show it is wrong? If those questions cannot be answered, it is not a truth machine. It is theater. Now let me show you this in ordinary life. You meet someone. They promise, they show up, they promise again, they show up again. After many repetitions, you compress that lived pattern into a belief. They are reliable. That belief is a small piece of mathematics in the human sense, a compression of repeated comparisons into a stable rule. Now formalize it, keep a log, count successes and failures, estimate uncertainty. Now you have statistics. Now you have math. But notice the order. The lived matching came first. The compression came second. So mathematics is not alien to life. It is life's compression discipline made public and sharpened. And it is always downstream of phi. Now we make the operational claim that must carry prediction. Here is the prediction. If this part is true, then we should expect mathematics to become more predictive wherever comparability becomes stronger, and less predictive wherever comparability becomes weaker. In simple words, more stable pattern, more mathematical success. Less stable pattern, more mathematical fragility. You can see this without any advanced science. A bakery with consistent ovens can scale recipes reliably. A factory with consistent thread can plan output. A clinic with transparent records can improve outcomes. Because in each case, the world is being made more comparable, more readable. And mathematics rides that readability like a boat rides a river. Now reverse it. A bakery with random heat will fail even with a perfect recipe. A factory with unstable materials will miss targets even with perfect accounting. A clinic that hides data will repeat mistakes even with brilliant theories. Mathematics did not become false. The domain became less comparable. The pattern became harder to compress faithfully, and the predictive reach shrank. So mathematics is not magic. It is a compression engine powered by coherence. And coherence is a Holophase native word. Because we do not grant claims a right to exist, we license them. We ask whether the pattern is stable enough to be read. We ask whether the window is coherent enough to justify inference. We ask whether prediction actually improves or whether we are overfitting fantasy. That is the firewall. Now the falsification. How could this claim die? Here is one clean way. If mathematics reliably predicts and controls outcomes in a domain where no stable patterns or comparability can be detected at any scale, then this part fails. Say it plainly. If someone shows mathematics working strongly where there are no stable distinctions to compress, then our foundation is wrong. Because our foundation says mathematics succeeds by capturing pattern. No pattern, no success. If you show success without pattern, you have broken our claim. Here is the second falsification. If making a domain more comparable makes no difference to mathematics, if standardization, repeatability, transparency, shared checking, uncertainty discipline, if all of that changes nothing, then our claim fails. Because we predict a tight coupling. More comparability, more predictive power. less comparability, less predictive power. So if you find a world where mathematics works the same in total fog as in clear daylight, we revise. That is not weakness. That is honesty. Now we state scope and limits, because holophase is not a license for sloppy statements. This part is not saying mathematics is just subjective. This part is not saying reality is beyond mathematics in some mystical way. This part is not saying phi is an equation. This part is saying something precise. Mathematics is a descriptive language we build inside a readable world. It works where it captures stable patterns that remain stable under comparison. It fails where it does not. And phi is the precondition that makes any capture, any pattern, any comparison meaningful at all. We are still in undifferentiated phi here. That matters. Because at this stage, we are not yet allowed to explain the world by importing ready-made notions as primitives. We are placing the permission layer. We are showing where mathematics sits relative to that permission. Later, when the public layer arrives, when change becomes readable, when readouts appear and are licensed, mathematics becomes one of the main public compression tools we use. But it still remains downstream. Now, a necessary reminder about energy, placed correctly. People often smuggle like this. Mathematics describes energy. Therefore, energy is fundamental. Therefore, mathematics is fundamental. No. In holophase, energy is a tally, not a substance. A bookkeeping readout that appears later when public readouts are available and licensed. So energy cannot be used here as the primitive reason mathematics works. Mathematics works because comparability exists. Energy tally is one of the later things we count once comparability is already public and stable. So we keep the order clean. Phi first. Comparability first. Mathematics as description later. Energy as tally later still. No smuggling. Now I want to touch the most seductive philosophical temptation. The idea that mathematical objects exist in a perfect realm. That numbers are more real than life. That our world is a shadow of pure form. I understand why this feels compelling. Because some mathematical truths feel inevitable. 2 plus 2 is 4 in Herat and in London. In hunger and in comfort. In joy and in grief. It feels like mathematics sits beneath the world like an eternal skeleton. Holophase offers a different reading. The inevitability is not proof that mathematics is the substance of reality. The inevitability is what stable comparability feels like from inside a coherent world. When same remains same and different remains different, you get invariants. And invariants feel unbreakable. Not because they are gods, but because coherence is strict. So yes, mathematics can feel discovered rather than invented. Because when you live inside a world where phi is consistent, you can discover consequences of that consistency that you did not choose. But you still must remember, even 2 plus 2 equals 4 only has meaning if there are distinguishable units. If 2 differs from 3, if equals differs from not equals, if identity and difference mean anything. That is phi. Mathematics does not create that. Mathematics presupposes it. So holophase does not need to deny the beauty people feel when they speak of mathematical inevitability. Holophase simply places the beauty on a cleaner foundation. The beauty is downstream of the permission. Now we return to the map one last time. Because this is the memory hook you can carry through your whole life. A map is priceless. A map can save you. A map can coordinate strangers. A map can carry knowledge across generations. But if you worship the map, you will die in the river you thought you crossed. Holophase teaches you to respect maps and still ask for the territory, to honor mathematics and still demand comparison, to use compression and still require truth. Because truth is not what is written. Truth is what survives tests. That is the firewall inside this part. So let me place the core claim once more, cleanly. Mathematics is not phi. Mathematics is a descriptive language that succeeds when it captures phi's stable pattern structure, and it fails when it does not. Now even simpler. Math writes the pattern. Phi makes pattern possible. And now the listener carry. One sentence. Small enough to hold, strong enough to use. Mathematics describes patterns. Phi makes patterns possible. Hold that. When you see elegant symbols, respect their power. But ask, what comparisons do they compress? What scope do they claim? What would show them wrong? If those questions cannot be answered, you are not looking at truth. You are looking at decoration. Now we close softly and we open the next door. We have cut a boundary that protects the entire project. We have separated the enabler from the description. Phi enables distinction. Mathematics describes the patterns of distinction. But a new temptation rises immediately after this. If phi is so fundamental, so necessary, so enabling, does it aim at something? Does it have a purpose? Is it trying to reach complexity, beauty, mind? That is the next cut. Part 26. Not teleological. Phi has no purpose. For now, keep this. The universe is patterned. We can describe those patterns with breathtaking precision. But the patterns rest on something simpler than any equation. The possibility that this is not that. The silent permission that makes all description grip reality. The blank page before the first note. The empty loom before the first thread. Mathematics is the score. Phi is the possibility of music. Always peace be upon you.